On this Victoria Day, we ask you to celebrate the holiday with a cup of spark plug coffee. Our sponsor provides premium quality coffee beans right to the door of Canadians and Americans, and we Canadians are the ones celebrating Victoria Day. And us Canadians aren't going to have to shell out for any shipping costs. Americans don't care about that holiday at all. Their holiday's next week. Not only is it cheaper and better than takeout Java, but it's convenient. That prompt delivery I talked about proves that. And you can brew with the best as often as you like, but join the Autopilot Coffee Club and set up your deliveries to come when the cupboard is actually getting bare, not just any old time when they want to send it to you and you can't stop it. Pause or even cancel if the need ever arises. It won't be a big hassle to quit the club, if and you need to. The website is sparkplug.coffee/HYES. HYES is our promo code, so put those 4 letters into the appropriate box and enjoy a one-time 20% discount. Okay, it's time to chat about this zany rom-com. Bev, let Andrew know that his musical services are required right now.
And action! Have you ever seen...
What's up, Doc? What's the good word, good friends? And happy Victoria Day for those who care about the holiday. I'm saying this again because sometimes people skip the sponsor stuff at the start of the podcast. Victoria Day. Canadians and I assume UKers get the day off, or will get paid overtime to work it like I will, so enjoy it. And thank you for opening up your ears to listen to this 666th episode on this podcasting channel that talks about classic movies. We saunter back into the filmic past and do spoiler-filled reviews of stuff we find there, usually classics. I'm the guy who's covered a lot of Buster Keaton movies in recent years, so the over-the-top car chase in this film made me feel right at home. Ryan. And here's the lady who sometimes talks like Bugs Bunny and likes staying at the Hilton. That's not really Bugs Bunny voice, Bugs Bunny voice, is it? I'm in the Bristol Hotel, actually. The Bristol Hotel is what it's called in the movie, but it is the Hilton. My wife, Bev.
That's me.
I said that this episode is number 666. I intended to have us cover something demonic or devilish in this slot. Originally, I thought about doing Devil Wears Rejects. That's all, I'm going to kill you. No, the Devil's Rejects from 2005. But I was going to do it on my own, and I don't think you want to watch that. So then I stopped caring about doing a specific episode for this day. So here we are covering something that is most decidedly not demonic or devilish. In fact, it's just a silly rom-com. Nothing sinister to see here. So let's get to the coming attractions trivia for What's Up, Doc? Oh, what's up, Doc? Verna Fields won an Oscar for editing Jaws. Fields also cut several films for Peter Bogdanovich, including What's Up, Doc? But what was her final film? How did she end her film career, at least her film-making career?
She stopped editing in the 70s, and then she became a studio exec until she passed away. I can't remember what her last film was. It was a big one, though, wasn't it?
Giveaway. She cut Jaws, and then they promoted her to a studio executive, like you said.
Oh, it was after Jaws. Yeah, okay.
She won the Oscar, one of the great editing jobs, certainly of the 70s, maybe ever. Probably saved that film, her editing work. Mother Cutter got a promotion, and then she died, not even 10 years after this movie came out, and certainly not even 10 years after that promotion happened.
What an incredible story of her life, how she even got into the business in the first place, and she did these unprecedented things for a woman, but also even for an editor.
And then Spielberg didn't work with her again because I read, and he might deny it now, he probably would have denied it back then too, that he didn't like how much credit she got for Jaws, so he didn't use her for the very next movie, Close Encounters. But then if she was made a studio executive right away, different studio too, that was Columbia, and then Universal was Jaws. So I don't know, maybe that wasn't anything like that.
The relationship with somebody as their editor versus their executive, talk about being on the complete other side of the aisle. The executives, those are the purse strings, right?
You must have worked with her again too.
You go from being his employee to his boss.
Yeah, and she must have worked with him again too because he worked with Universal, because that's what Jaws was, on E.T. But I'm not sure he worked with Universal as a director until then, after Jaws anyway. So Pratfalls was released by Warner Brothers on March 10th, 1972, and it went on to be just a giant hit. It cost something like $4 million, but made 15 times years old. Love doing that Michael Caine thing. No, 15 times that much money at the box office. But Bev, we need a refresher about the story on this one. Help us out by giving us the lowdown, the skinny, if you will, on What's Up, Doc?
One of the hardest skinnies I've ever written.
Okay.
ryano'neal is Howard, a stuffy musicology professor visiting San Francisco with his overbearing fiancée Eunice to pursue a research grant. Barbra Streisand is Judy, a daffy, verbose, repeated college dropout who sets her sights on Howard and conspires to get his attention.
Daffy, by the way, good call there. Daffy Duck.
Well, yeah, exactly appropriate. Although she is Bugs Bunny.
Yes.
They are both sharing a hotel with a spy with ill-gotten top-secret files and an heiress flaunting her very stealable collection of jewels. And wouldn't you know, they all have identical luggage. Many misunderstandings and hijinks ensue, including thrown pies, electrical fires, and a car chase through a parade. After everyone flies off the pier into San Francisco Bay, they're all dragged in front of a judge who sets it all straight. Howard gets his grant, Judy gets Howard, and that's all, folks.
Or in a nutshell, and I looked at this for hours last night and couldn't come up with anything, so here's what I came up with this morning. Looney Tunes as directed by Peter Bogdanovich. It's not just the title, it's the zany, everything is happening style. And like we say, Barbra Streisand is Bugs Bunny. She always escapes the chaos that she often creates, I think usually creates, just fine, just like he always does. I like Bugs Bunny like everyone does, but he's a bit of a dick, too, in those cartoons.
I know, but you can't help but root for him.
Bit of a snob. Did you ever get turned on when Bugs Bunny would dress like a girl? No. A little Wayne's World reference there for you. Okay, well, the numbers on What's Up, Doc are pretty great. Rotten Tomatoes critics like it just fine, not incredibly well, but good. 89% of them say it's good, 40 fresh, 5 rotten, and 88% of audiences. Peter Bogdanovich's best-known films, like Last Picture Show and Paper Moon and such, have even better reviews than this did. These are the second best reviews for Ryan on Rotten Tomatoes and the third best for Barbra Streisand in her acting career. Speaking of 3, this was third at the 1972 U.S. box office. The Godfather was number 1. The Poseidon Adventure was number 3. And Deliverance was number 4. So now we've covered the top 4 movies that year. This was only up for 2 awards of any kind. It won one of them and was nominated for the other. The nomination was a Golden Globe nomination for Madeline Kahn for Most Promising Newcomer and a WGA win, so the Writers Guild Award, for the screenplay by David Newman, Robert Benton, and then Buck Henry. Apparently he came in later to work on it. Newman and Benton were writing partners. Henry worked on it later. This was 68th on AFI's Top 100 Passions. The movie that inspired it, at least one of the many that did, but one of the obvious ones that did, was Bringing Up Baby. That was 51st. And it was 61st on AFI's Top 100 Laughs. Bringing Up Baby was 14th. And What's Up, Doc was nominated in the romantic comedy category of the Top 100 genres. You always have to remind me, if you've seen a movie before, this was the first time, right?
This is my first time.
Okay, so what'd you think of What's Up, Doctor?
I found it thoroughly charming. It's actually so funny. It pays loyal homage to those screwball comedies, like you said, and those Warner Brothers cartoons, but it feels like its own thing, too. Streisand and O'Neal, they're so endearing. I love their chemistry. I just found it a frothy delight.
I don't think they work together again, those two. If they did, I can't think of an example. It's too bad, because she had some great chemistry, Red for the Next Year and The Way We Were, and many other films she made, but this was good chemistry here. This is our third ryano'neal movie this year.
We went from never ever covering it in all the years we've been doing the podcast to 3 in 1 year. And it's like
not even half a year yet.
May, yeah.
And he's probably not going to be coming up again. I don't think he has any other movies we want to cover. But Love Story, such a huge hit a couple years before this. Then this, Paper Moon with Bogdanovich and his daughter the next year. I think that was a big hit. I know it was well respected. And it won her an Oscar for supporting actress. Then he's in Barry Lyndon for Kubrick. So the 70s belonged to a lot of actors. Nicholson and Pacino and De Niro and Hoffman, and Jane Fonda was getting huge, and a lot of the stars were still stars. Greg Peck was still doing well. But then it also was a Ryan O'Neal decade, and a Streisand decade for that matter. And also the director who didn't continue making good stuff for that long, Peter Bogdanovich. But what a start to the decade he had.
Talk about range for Ryan O'Neal. You couldn't find 3 more different parts to play, and he is great. Well, okay, I'm sorry. He's great in 2 of them.
He's
Love
better
Story,
than, we'll say
literally nobody's good in Love Story. So.
No, but for the third time, and possibly we've said this in the past few months, including that podcast, he was better than she was.
Okay, that bar is in hell. So, yes, he is better than she is, but he's not incredible. But he's so great in this. My favorite performance of his, of the 3.
Okay.
It's definitely Barry Lyndon.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. So 2 things. You mentioned the old classic rom-coms in general, Capra stuff, and Howard Hawks to some degree.
Just those screwball comedies from the 30s.
And I guess Lubitsch maybe was an homage there too by Bogdanovich and the writers and everybody, the actors. But also Buster Keaton. Now that specifically is for the car chase. What was the one you watched with me? Was it Sherlock Jr.? A couple years ago?
Yeah, we did watch that. We also watched the one where he's a sailor. They're on a ship.
The Navigator?
That must be it.
But that didn't involve cars, and I think Sherlock Jr. was a lot of car and bike stunts.
Okay.
I've seen so many of his movies the last few years. They all jam together now. I love Keaton, but they don't really stand apart when you cover so many in the span of a few years. I think it's Sherlock Jr. Anyway, the one with the car and the bike chase, and I think it's a car ends up in the water. This is obviously directly homaging that, and I didn't even pick up on it when we were watching it the first time. I should have, because I've seen these movies before and not that long ago.
And it homaged the Warner Brothers cartoons, but how much were the Warner Brothers cartoons inspired also by those old silent films? All these things were borrowing from each other anyway.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
There was a thing with Casablanca in the mid-40s, or I think it was the mid-40s, must have been later in the 40s, I guess, where Bugs Bunny and everybody do a Casablanca thing. And then Bugs Bunny also inspired Clark Gable's character, and maybe the greatest screwball comedy of all time. It happened one night.
But it was the other way around. Clark Gable's performance inspired the creation of Bugs Bunny.
You're right, yeah.
Bugs Bunny was based on his performance. Somewhat based on his performance.
Especially the carrot eating scene in It Happened One Night. He eats them like Bugs did. Okay, you're right. That's what.
And just the unflappable rogue who always wins, but you can never be mad at him.
And that movie from the old days is, we've said it many times, one of the truly funniest movies we've ever seen. And so many old movies we don't think are all that funny. That is, what's the list I always give? His Girl Friday certainly is. Lady Eve certainly is. Preston Sturges then, another guy that influenced Bogdanovich with Lady Eve especially. There's a snake in the hotel, supposedly. We never see it, but that's a whole plot line in the Lady Eve. I don't like it as much as you, by the way. I don't think I actually answered that question. Or
What's up, Doc?
I do like it. I remember not being much of a fan before, but that's maybe because I didn't like Streisand very much back in the day. But I like her more now because I've covered her only twice in this podcast. You've only covered her once now, but The Way We Were I did maybe 2 years ago. And I thought she was pretty great in that. And I've seen more of her stuff since then. I do find her to be a vain actress and head up her ass, that kind of stuff. But I just like her more. I cut her a little more slack than I used to. So maybe that was the problem. I didn't love ryano'neal back. I thought he was fine, but this milquetoast guy is a star. But now having seen 3 of his movies in a short period of time, yeah, you're impressed by the range. Same goes for her. She could be funny, but she also has done so many serious movies, and this is such a zany performance. She's never probably looked prettier than she does in this movie. She's so cute.
She's so appealing.
And then Bogdanovich. He goes from Last Picture Show the year before this, which maybe had some humor in it, but mostly was a very serious black and white period movie with a Western theme in a lot of ways,
It's
too.
like funny in an amusing way, but certainly not
a comedy.
an overwhelming comedy. Yeah.
And then this is the next year. Paper Moon's the year after that. I think that's black and white, too. That's a comedy, I guess. I haven't seen it in a long time. But also a buddy story with father and daughter. And then what do you do after that? Well, some of the stuff started being pretty bad. At Long Last Love, which apparently was a huge dud, but was a musical homage. There's a lot of Cole Porter in this. That movie's all about Cole Porter songs. I haven't seen it maybe ever or in a long time. I think it's Sybil Shepherd and Burt Reynolds in that. I think that's a musical even. Nickelodeon he made, and other ones. Was it him that made that? I think so. And they didn't do anywhere near as well, but what a short period of time here. I'm forgetting something he made that was also pretty huge. And then, of course, he becomes an actor, and a pretty good one. He's in The Sopranos. He is Melfi's psychiatrist.
That's right, yeah.
The shrinks shrink.
Yeah. His career never seemed to recover once his wife, who worked with him,
Platt.
left him. Yeah. There's like a couple of other examples I always like to cite, the George Lucas thing.
Yep.
After him and his wife split up, and she was also his editor. So obviously they were collaborators.
Well, Platt wasn't his editor. She was the costume designer. Not costumes. I think she worked on the sets and was a producer in general. And I think gotta be that she was his confidant at dinner.
Yeah, of course.
What are we going to do tomorrow on the shoot, Pete? I don't know, Paulie. What do you think?
Ada Hitchcock, is that her name?
Alma.
Even Hitchcock gave her credit, and film historians always give her credit for being his collaborator, but I don't know her name off the top of my head. Yeah, this could be an example of that. I mean, this is pure speculation. Who knows? Lots of things can happen that can like tank a director's career.
Lucas's movies weren't as good when Marcia left him, or I think she left him. Yeah, that's what it was.
And she got enough money that they just went and bought a ranch somewhere.
Okay, yeah. Her credits do dry up. She maybe worked on things eventually, but not nearly as much. And then again, he didn't really direct or even produce that much. Well, I guess he produced a lot. But he wasn't a director much after the first Star Wars until we got to the prequels in the late 90s. I think you also
get the thing that happens with probably any artist who's working in a medium where there's so much money involved, which is when you're hungry and you have to work really hard and probably listen to a lot of executives and make a lot of people happy, then you can make great work. But as soon as you get that long leash, maybe you start drinking your own Kool-Aid and just believing that the hype probably happens to a lot of people. You have to have a tremendous ego to be a filmmaker in the first place. It's just such a crazy art form to pursue and succeed at. I can't imagine what kind of person could do this, to manage millions of dollars and all the egos everybody else you're working with, including execs and actors. Yeah, exactly. It takes a kind of person that has to be pretty confident. And so there's lots of things that can make that confidence go overkill.
I'm not sure Bogdanovich had a problem with confidence, but Paulie Platt didn't leave him. He left her. It was the reverse of the Lucas thing.
He left her for
Sybil Shepherd, who he met on Last Picture Show. And, of course, she was a stunner, and they were together for a while. He ended up with Dorothy Stratton, the one who was killed by her boyfriend, became the story of Star 80, but then he married her sister. I forget her name now. sometime later on. Well, it's an opinion, right? Somebody could say, I think Long Last Love is my favorite movie.
Sure.
Nickelodeon is awesome too. But most people don't think that. It's the early 70s stuff. I like the Cat's Meow from 2001 a lot. The one about Charlie Chaplin, Marion Davies, William Randolph Hearst, and a bunch of other people, Hollywood people, on a boat, a yacht or something. And the storyline is the rumor, I guess, that was always, I didn't know until I saw the movie, that apparently Chaplin and Davies were friends, but then Hearst, who was with Davies, thought, oh, he's messing around with my lady, thought Chaplin was sitting talking to her, and spoiler alert, killed the wrong guy, killed some other dude talking to her that looked like Chaplin apparently, and then the story ends up being about a cover-up because he's William Randolph Hearst, and he gets away with killing somebody, and nobody ever said anything. That was supposedly a rumor.
Just make the meanest movies about William Randolph Hearst.
True. And that was after RKO 281 in 1998, which is the Citizen Kane story. I love that one. A TV movie. Should have been a feature-length film. I love that one. Great cast and everything. But that's the best Bogdanovich movie for me, anything close to the recent era. He did Texasville as a sequel to Last Picture Show about 20 years later, and a lot of the cast came back. Bridges and I think Sybil Shepherd and everybody else now 20 years older and everything. No one really talks about that as a good or certainly not a great movie, and yet he made a movie that could have won Best Picture, Best Director, and everything else. It did win Supporting Actor and Supporting Actress Oscars, Last Picture Show, for Leachman and for Ben Johnson. Then he makes this and Paper Moon and all this stuff, and he's on top of the world. The same time frame, the guy who beat him out, Last Picture Show was probably second, no worse than third that year, because A Clockwork Orange was, if not second, then it was third. But French Connection, and that's William Friedkin. And Friedkin went from that to The Exorcist, one of the biggest hits. It was, for a little while, the biggest hit of all time.
Wow.
It beat out The Godfather, Sound of Music, and so on, until we got Jaws and Star Wars and so on. Put those in the dust. Although Exorcist is still one of the biggest hits ever. French Connection was a big hit. And it won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, all that stuff. They were both on top of the world. But you look at their output, and as the decades go on, they kept working, especially Friedkin, even more so than Bogdanovich, and almost nothing comes close to their early work. But Spielberg and Lucas and Marty, to some extent De Palma, all got their start in the 70s, and they continued on making great stuff for a long time to come. So some of it's dumb luck, some of it maybe is an ego that's in check, some of it's like Spielberg keeps on making great stuff and huge hits over and over and over again, and mostly Marty made good movies, if not big hits, over and over and over again. I think Bogdanovich had an ego problem, and you're down, people will make you stay there if it's possible to keep you there. Some people rise back up and recreate their career again, but he never really did.
Some people are, I don't say one-trick ponies, but they have a style that just happens to hit the exact appropriate tone at the exact right time. Mm-hmm. This is your vision in the 70s when this is exactly what audiences wanted. Directors like Spielberg and Scorsese, they grew with the times. They changed, they adapted. They had more different things to say, and they were interested in exploring different things, and that was their trick too, because their careers have gone all these different directions over the years, and they've always been interested in exploring new ideas rather than just going back to the same old well. Now, I haven't seen Bogdanovich's other movies.
Well, let me go through. I finally found it on Wikipedia, so this is it in order. Targets, which we saw not that long ago. I think a pretty good thriller. I don't know if you loved it.
Oh, yeah, very good thriller.
No budget thriller, made for Roger Corman as well. Boris Karloff is the, not really star of that, but creative movie to use footage that was already shot and then actually have him be in the storyline as well. And Bogdanovich is his co-star. Last Picture Show, What's Up Doc, Paper Moon, Daisy Miller, At Long Last Love, Nickelodeon. I'm not going to go through everything. I'm going to skip over some now. They weren't movies that people talked about. Mask. I like Mask. There you go. That's really good.
Mask is a good movie. Yeah,
and that won the Oscar for makeup. Texasville was the early 90s. Noises Off, Cat's Meow. Then he only ever directed one other feature film after Cat's Meow in 2001, and that was She's Funny That Way in 2014. But at least he kept acting and was an emeritus type scholarly guy. He's great on podcasts. What are you talking? Just a making of, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Knew Orson
interviews,
Welles.
He's wonderful.
Knew John Ford, was close to both guys, especially Wells, who lived with him for a little while. So at least he has all those things going for him as well. All right, well, back to What's Up, Doc. So
yes.
It does start out with a book and pages reveal the credits. That's creative. We've seen other movies do that. That's probably an homage to the old days, too. I think old movies did that. Yeah, I know they did.
Makes me think of Cinderella.
That's what it is. I know I've seen that recently in a movie we covered. It was Cinderella. And then You're the Top, that Streisand's singing. That's a Cole Porter song. I believe I read that it plays at the end in the credits, and she sings it with Ryan But I guess we stopped the credits or something because I didn't notice that. And we also get Once Upon a Time, which I always find to be a bit of a cliche unless it is a true Cinderella-type story, which this is not, but okay. The most unbelievable thing in this movie is the bags, which is the MacGuffin there. Doesn't matter what it is as long as everyone wants it. 4 people have the same bag, which is not just some bland, what do they call that? Halliburton. The silvery gray not even suitcase, but a briefcase that guys have had, women too, but a lot of guys have had over the years, that looks exactly the same, or we all have black luggage. This is black, this luggage.
Red plaid.
But then has the plaid. And maybe that's just because let's just go zany. But 4 people in the same hotel, the same weekend, have the exact same thing.
I believe that Judy and Howard would have the same bag. They're hovering in the same social class. But the idea that Judy would have the same bag as this rich heiress, and that's where she keeps her jewels.
And then the government thing.
In a bag that would come from that day's equivalent of Target, if you're talking about it's the same luggage that the plebes use. You have to be forgiving and suspend your disbelief.
And when you go this zany, then I'm not going to be too much of a pain about it because that's the whole point. But Howard has rocks in his bag because he's what do we call him?
He's a musicologist, but he's writing his thesis or his research is about the musicology of different minerals, I guess.
Right. Okay. Yeah. The government papers, so the espionage stuff and all that's in one of them. Mrs. Van Hoskins, is it Mrs. or Miss? Anyway, Van Hoskins, her jewels, and then Judy has clothes and a dictionary, so obviously the least important stuff is in her bag. And the chase happens because the 2 of them abscond with all 4 of them, and everybody chases them, especially the government guys, and for that matter, the jewels are needed. From that standpoint, the story makes some sense. It isn't just this happens, this happens, this happens. There's a natural progression as to why they're being chased. That is an elaborate scene. It took them apparently weeks to shoot that. I told you I wasn't a huge fan of this movie the first time, and I'd like it this time, but not maybe as much as you. I didn't love that scene, and I didn't love it in Blues Brothers, which takes it to a whole other level. That chase sequence is just decimating cars. Maybe because it does feel a little too real in both cases, and people would get hurt, and you're putting all these people, in this case in San Francisco, in danger. They're at Chicago, I think, in Blues Brothers. That, yes, it's funny to a degree, but I also cringe a little bit too much at both of them. But hey, kudos in both cases, Blues Brothers and What's Up, Doc, for the stunt work, the way it's directed by Bogdanovich and all that stuff pays off beautifully. I just don't really enjoy it as much, at least in the case of Keaton with, I guess it's Sherlock Jr. It was the silent era. That was his thing. He himself was a stunt man. But I also said in that podcast, I don't really laugh at Keaton's movies that much. I can love them and appreciate them without really laughing at them. Okay, go ahead.
I just got to point out, we recently rewatched True Lies, and
also a comedy,
I think
though.
Somebody gets shot to death in every scene of that film. People who are just minding their business, but in someone's way, get either shot to death or knocked unconscious constantly. But you're like, they're driving haphazardly.
It doesn't feel like a tonal problem. I think that's it. I know Blues Brothers is always funny, and this is always funny, and then you throw in something that does feel more serious. I don't know that Landis or Bogdanovich pulled it off as well as James Cameron did, even though they're funnier directors than he is, obviously. That's their métier, more than it was ever his. But True Lies is quite funny, maybe because Arnold is crossing up the big, bad, tough guy with funniness.
He's killing people left and right and then apologizing to people he's
sorry,
getting in their way.
Excuse me.
Yeah. It's supposed to be cartoonish.
I liked it more this time than I did the first time, I guess is what it is. So I like Streisand more than I used to, and I like that sequence more than I used to. It's well done, though, of course. The whole thing with the pane of glass.
Oh, my God.
Because back in the old days,
great payoff.
The stunt would have been they're carrying that pane of glass across, and it would have been broken right away. Or maybe the second person that comes through would have bashed through it. But many people miss it until finally it's the guy that's up on the ladder.
Yeah.
Who's...
It's the 2 perilous situations. There's a guy on top of the ladder trying to hang a sign and the pane of glass, and they're both constantly being bombarded by this stream of people chasing one another, and they go back and forth, and oh my God, and then finally... It's the guy teetering that swings down.
His ladder gets knocked over.
Yeah.
And he
What a
breaks the glass.
great payoff to that gag. Really hilarious. It would have been so easy for them to fall back on these safe gags, but it felt like they were elevating these things that we were used to. Elevating these gags that we've all seen 100 times.
That's
and
true.
like really making it funnier. I guess you can credit the screenwriters to some extent. Some great screenwriters on this project, including Buck Henry, also on top of the world at this time.
Coming off of The Graduate.
Hollywood. Yeah. Coming up with truly great ideas and never being lazy about it.
Well, it's very creative. Now, I guess O'Neill's, is he top billed? No, Streisand is, according to Wikipedia, which makes sense. She was the bigger name, even though he was doing big things. So he's very solid and pretty funny. Of course, it's an homage in a lot of ways to Cary Grant in Bringing Up Baby, the nerdy, glasses-wearing scientist, I guess, in both cases. And then you got the chaos magnet, Katharine Hepburn, in Bringing Up Baby, and Streisand in this movie. Now, she is well-read and pretty much brilliant because she keeps going to college and then leaving or maybe dropping
Getting kicked out.
Is it getting kicked out? Yeah, the way she is, I guess she gets kicked out. But then we find out at the end that her dad is the judge. He's pretty funny, too. Liam Dunn is the judge at the, not quite end of the movie, but the last maybe 25 minutes or so. It's only at the end of that whole sequence, though, when they're all in court, very similar to You Can't Take It With You, which I covered last year, where everybody's in court all together at once because of something, and that's a very zany screwball comedy, too, that Capra did back in the 30s. But they're all in court there, they're all in court here, and it's only at the end where she's been covered by a blanket. What is it? He says, "Take that blanket off, young lady." "Hi, Daddy." I don't know if it's really all that important to pay off, but then I guess you can find out how she can go to so many colleges and afford to do that when she's got a judge for a dad.
How she can keep getting into trouble and getting away with it, too. How she has this very devil-may-care attitude about her crazy actions.
And he's introduced as already being stressed out and ready to go over the edge before all these people come in his courtroom, and then he really starts losing it. Maybe the logic there is, without actually saying it, this daughter is aging me fast. I love her, but she's also a pain in my behind, which is probably going to be Howard's future.
I love them together. I think it's adorable, but they are not a couple that I see lasting all that long.
It's almost more believable in bringing up Baby at the end. And I mean the last few seconds, as I recall, at the end of that movie, we covered it many years ago. It was on the AFI's list. The only Howard Hawks movie that made either the 1998 or 2007 lists, which seems insane that he wouldn't have 3 or 4 on there. But anyway, it's the last few seconds, so spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, where finally, I think it's David is Cary Grant's character's name. "I can't be with you. You're so different from me." And in the maybe last 3 seconds, "Oh, well," and he just grabs her and kisses her and finally succumbs. That's less believable, but at least it's, well, maybe it's not, because he realizes, I don't belong with you, but I do want you, so fine, I'll kiss you. And we need that at the end of the movie. A kiss on the lips, black on the books, like this in Bad and the Beautiful, the movie. But in this movie, they're on the plane together. I guess she's stalked him on this plane. She's not coincidentally going to Iowa, where he's going, is where he lives. He's going back home. But then he apologizes. Whatever he said earlier when he left her after the court case. Is it him that says, "Do you happen to know that I love you?" Or is it her that said that?
He says it because he's the one that has to come around. She basically loves him at first sight. Right. The whole impetus of the movie is that she's pursuing him.
Naked in his bathtub when he's got a fiancé.
Impersonating his fiancé in the scene in the dinner.
Which he goes with because it's working. It's going to get him the grant because she's charming Larrabee. They kiss. Well, he apologizes, and she says to him, reprising that stupid line from Love Story, even though it's one of the most famous lines of all time, "Love means never having to say you're sorry." But I love that he's the one that says it. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard.
Because it is the dumbest thing.
And it's also a play off of this famous movie, famous line, blockbuster hit from only 2 years earlier.
Part of the reason he goes along with Judy being at the dinner impersonating his fiancé is because Larrabee, who's the man who decides who gets the grant that he's competing for, is so charmed by her. And he's like, okay, well, I'll just keep her around because this is working. But she replaces Eunice, who ultimately ends up with Larrabee.
That's true. Yeah.
At the end. They couple up, and they seem to be a better match. And she is played by Madeline Kahn in her first part. How crazy is that? Because this is a comic actress fully formed.
Comic genius.
She is amazing, so fully committed.
She was nominated the following 2 years for Paper Moon, along with Tatum O'Neal, who won, 73. Then she was nominated in Blazing Saddles, but she was also in Young Frankenstein that year. I think she's even funnier than that. I don't remember Blazing Saddles. I saw it a long time ago. I'm not the biggest fan of that one, even though I love Young Frankenstein and the producers from Mel Brooks, but I'm not the hugest Blazing Saddles fan. But the thing that she really shows here, and I think in all those movies, really for that matter, is first an attractiveness. Maybe not so much in this. In Young Frankenstein, I think she's so beautiful on top of being such a funny person. But she also has an annoying voice, and I'm never annoyed by it. And maybe I should be. But then she's also got such a comic gift. She and Gilda Radner were two of the more underrated comics of the 70s. It's too bad she died so young. And then Madeline Kahn is like Bogdanovich. She kept working, but she didn't make that many things you talk about the way you did when she first came on the scene. But this was her debut. No, you don't really like her, but you never dislike her.
Yeah,
you're glad she ends up with Larrabee.
Yeah, it's true. You don't really want to see bad things happen to her. I mean, she gets humiliated here and there, but it's not like she has this really unhappy end. Like, say, we just covered 9 to 5. Dabney Coleman at the end of 9 to 5 has this over-the-top terrible outcome. You don't want to see her banished to the Amazon. You want to see her actually be happy and end up with somebody who wants to be henpecked to death, which is just her way.
Larrabee's like that, yeah. She doesn't deserve, I should say, Gina Carano to tear her apart, because I think that's what they're saying at the end of 9 to 5.
The way he gets torn apart by warrior women.
It's not just people who live in the Amazon.
Yeah.
It's Amazonians in that sense.
But another actor who is the perfect foil, being a villain who is cartoonishly bad, but still cartoonishly fun.
But Eunice isn't a villain, he is.
She's a foil. It's true. She's not like a villain. She's just a foil. They don't seem like they belong together. He seems like he's just been bullied into this relationship, but he's too passionate to do anything about it. I think it's fair to say he's going to get bullied in his new relationship, too.
This isn't going to last long, I don't think.
I know.
Another homage to Bringing Up Baby is twice his clothes get ripped by Judy, although it's the other way around in Bringing Up Baby because it's Katharine Hepburn's dress that gets ripped, and then Cary Grant's got to plow himself right up behind her, which isn't really made sexual in 1938. It couldn't have been, but in some ways it is sexual, isn't it? But that's so he can keep her from being embarrassed by having this torn dress and having herself revealed her back and everything like that. As I recall, that was pretty funny in that movie. I didn't love that one either. Of all of Hawks' great films, that's the one that makes AFI's list. I preferred His Girl Friday, for one thing. Bogdanovich works in all these homages to these old movies with a lot of young people that would have been going to the movies so much in the 70s and this great era of filmmaking that probably didn't know about some of these things. So it would have felt new to them. In a way, he was doing what Tarantino did 20 years later, making something new out of all these old tropes. Bogdanovich did it in a way first, well, obviously first before Tarantino did. And I think Paper Moon is an homage to those kinds of old movies as well. And Last Picture Show certainly is an homage to those old kinds of movies.
Proof that I think audiences don't need to know to enjoy. Of course, film lovers will know and they'll appreciate the homage.
They'll get more out of it.
One of the best filmmakers of not our generation, older than us, but look at Tarantino, who's aggressively homaging stuff, very intentionally and very obviously homaging stuff that almost nobody has seen in many cases. But he'll really be honest about where his inspiration comes from and never hide it. I remember there's this old adage that one of my old executive producers said to us when we were trying to balance accessibility of stuff that we were making, F it, they'll look it up. And if they don't, who cares? So something goes over their head. We are all accustomed to things going over our head. We all, as kids, watch things and don't understand it. Understanding dawns on us later, and that's okay. You don't have to get every joke in every movie and TV show.
Repeat viewings, and also, yes, maybe it's one of those things of don't explain it because way too many things will tell us literally what they're talking about here, what the joke is.
I mean, you and I are both gigantic Simpsons fans, but when that show was first airing, there was tons of jokes that would go right over my head, and now rewatching them as an adult, I appreciate them on a different level. So it doesn't have to ruin it at all. In fact, it's good to expect a little more of your audiences.
One more thing about the plot, at least one more thing, maybe there's more you want to talk about, but the bags with all the owners, I don't love that.
It gets confusing.
The thing that I think works the least, it's one thing to have expensive jewels in there. It's one thing to have rocks that mean nothing to anyone but Howard, and then clothes that mean nothing except to Judy. But the espionage thing, that's where this also gets a little bit serious for me, I guess, in a way.
Look at you. You're like a scold about
these guys
this
want
movie.
to kill each other, and these other people are just trying to live their lives.
Sir, there are consequences to your actions. You can't just dive into San Francisco Bay with those important files. At least they're soaked in the bad guys won't get them. Why isn't anybody talking about this?
Did that work for you?
Espionage stuff they never really dive into. They introduce it at the beginning, and I kept waiting. Right, I kept waiting for them to explain it more, or for it to become a bigger part of the plot. They could have just stuck with the jewels, like something a little more straightforward, and had 3 bags and had that, or even 2 bags. Let's be real, it's a little too busy. And maybe this is part of trying to take a format that we're typically used to seeing in 10-minute chunks. You know, think of those old Looney Tunes cartoons.
Yeah.
I think it does have more of a Looney Tunes style of plotting. The overarching plot is like those screwball comedies, but minute to minute, the silliness level is more like a Mel Brooks movie or Looney Tunes cartoon. So
even the performances are zany that way.
Very much, yeah. Everything's so over the top. And that is great, but it is always something that's hard to expect the audience to stick with for 90 minutes straight. Like any movie that's doing anything like that, and I find this myself when I'm watching action films a lot too, I just tend to zone out eventually. It's like your brain just gets overwhelmed and it's no longer funny. It's just kind of people.
With this?
No, there were definitely parts I zoned out when they're chasing the bags around in the rooms and the open doors, closed doors. Something that in a Looney Tunes cartoon would be 1 minute of screen time.
Yeah.
It felt like it went on, and then they kept coming back to it, and it was like, okay, I get it.
And then Judy's naked outside of Howard's room because she was in the tub, is holding on by her fingertips.
Yeah, that towel would have been long gone. Mm-hmm. That would have, in San Francisco.
It's a creative idea, but I didn't think it was all that hilarious. But that scene ends with a big fire in the room and then thousands of dollars in damage, and then all the things that happen in the big chase. And Hoskins, the lady, pays off everything, ends up giving them $50 because that's what's left.
There's a $2,000 reward for the return of the jewels. Minus $50 covers all the damage that they did. Mm-hmm.
So in the end, Howard and Judy profited.
Yes.
And it's Judy that exposes Hugh Simon's plagiarism, because he's the one that would have got the grant. Larrabee changed his mind, but then when she is the one, because she knows stuff, this ties together pretty well. She's certainly not dumb. She knows all about his plagiarism, or realizes that he is a plagiarist. And then Larrabee says, oh, well, no, okay, fine, it's back to you, because Howard had the grant, then lost the grant, then gets it back at the end.
Hugh Simon, played by Kenneth Mars.
Who's very funny in this.
He's so funny, and it's a great example of a little goes a long way because he gets to just overplay everything he does.
He ad-libbed a lot.
He's got this silly accent. He does these big dramatic hair flips, floats into a scene, does something hysterical, and then floats off, comes back once in a while. It doesn't feel like there's ever too much of him.
Like he does in Young Frankenstein.
Isn't he also in the producers?
He's the writer of the producers of the play.
He's the Nazi, basically.
I'm the writer. Yeah. You're the audience. I outrank you. Because he's an old Nazi soldier. All right, well, Streisand, only one podcast on this channel before today was The Way We Were, which I covered by myself a couple years ago. She won 2 Oscars. I guess she could win again. She's still working sometimes. But she won for acting in Funny Girl. Tied Hepburn, in fact. Hepburn was in Lion in Winter that year, which we've covered. They are one of the rare ties in the history of the Oscars. And also she won for the song Evergreen in the 1976 A Star Is Born. We've covered 2 versions of A Star Is Born on this channel. I did one last year, and you and I did one a couple years ago. But we didn't do the 76 one, her and Chris Christopherson. And as I said before, she's so, I would say, flat out sexy, which I rarely have thought about her, but she looks great in this. And she was modeled after Carole Lombard, who was a star of My Man Godfrey. That makes more sense when you think of that performance. Remember when she's draped over, who's the star of that again? Is it David Niven? Or William Powell, maybe that's it. William Powell, I think.
That's right.
He's carrying her up to her bedroom and she's just flopping back and forth. I can see Streisand doing that in this movie and pulling it off well. And also, what a great tie-in. Couldn't be intentional because this was already a named street. But that windy street, that famous one in San Francisco that they drive down at one point, the hairpin turns, is called Lombard Street.
Nice. She apparently really wanted to work with Bogdanovich, and the exec, I forget which exec, but an exec was telling him, hey.
John Calley, I think it was.
Okay, so he's saying to him, Streisand wants to make a movie with you. What would you want to do? Bogdanovich is like, I could see her being in a goofy 30s screwball comedy. Yeah, she's like a daffy. That's where I got the word daffy from. He literally said, oh, she's like a daffy girl, too smart for her own good. And the guy's, I don't know, a stuffy professor type.
Yeah.
And then they fall in love. And the exec is like, yes, make that. But they had to shoot this on a tight schedule because they were working around her. And I think O'Neill has some scheduling issues too. But that's how it came together. It says a lot about probably how much cachet she must have had at the time.
They shot in San Francisco, all over the place. I think some of the interiors might have been in Hollywood, but most of it was in San Francisco. And I've got from August to November of 71. That could be reshoots, because that's a fairly long shoot for the 70s. Maybe it was August into September, and then they came back for other stuff, playing off what you're saying, that they had to shoot this fairly quickly. So we talked about O'Neill being in 3 movies that we've covered this year, Love Story, Barry Lyndon, and now this. And she also calls him Steve a lot, never explains why. I wondered about this, and then I looked online, and apparently this was correct. That's an homage to another Hawks film, which I covered, I think, last year, To Have and Have Not. Lauren Bacall is always calling Bogart Steve, but his name is Harry. And this, it's Howard, but she's always calling him Steve, because I guess the reason why was that Howard Hawks' wife called him Steve. Apparently, when he was still with Polly Platt, they got close with Howard Hawks, who was obviously getting up there, and so was John Ford. They both still made movies, but they were getting to the ends of their careers. What was it? Supposedly, Bogdanovich was closer with Hawks, and Platt was closer with Ford. And I guess Ford was mad at Bogdanovich for that marriage breaking up, leaving his wife.
Really?
That's what I read. Maybe that's not true. But they were close with them, and of course, Bogdanovich also got to know Hitchcock and Wells pretty well. Just that part of his career, never mind the filmmaking. He was truly a confidant in some way of all these people, not just some hanger-on, and they treat him like a fan. They treat him, I think, like an equal, and certainly like a friend, it seemed like. Of course, Wells was down and out. He needed some help. I think he literally lived with Bogdanovich and Platt, or at least Bogdanovich for a while.
Wow.
Madeline Kahn, I guess we said her credits already. Oh, she's also in the Muppet movie. She's one of the many people that makes a cameo in that. But the 70s, what a great decade for Madeline Kahn. And so good. Man, she was so funny. As was Kenneth Mars in this time frame. His best stuff was also around then, because he was in the producers in Young Frankenstein, and he's also in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Austin Pendleton is Larrabee. He's also in the Muppet movie, but he's a main player. He's the assistant to the bad guy in that, who's Charles Durning, I believe, the one that wants to turn Kermit into frog's legs.
Oh, yeah.
One frog provides one meal, but I've got to have Kermit. Just find other frogs. He's also a voice, Pendleton is, in Finding Nemo. We covered that. And he's in Searching for Bobby Fischer, which Chris and I covered on Scoring at the Movies. This guy was in so many movies we've covered. Michael Murphy. He was in MASH, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and Nashville for Altman, also in Manhattan, Magnolia, and Away From Her. And every one of those movies has been podcasted on this channel. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, now 7 Michael Murphy movies. Philip Roth, I think he's Mr. Jones, one of the espionage dudes. He was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest a few years later. I think he's one of the patients in that, but mostly did TV. You didn't recognize him, I'm sure, because you probably didn't watch the Dukes of Hazzard like I did. But Sorrel Book, when I was young, I always thought it was a bookie. But I think it's just pronounced Book, so Book with an E in the end. He's one of the espionage guys. Or no, he's the hotel detective. Anyway, he was in Failsafe and The Iceman Cometh, but of course also Boss Hogg and the Dukes of Hazzard. That was Randy Quaid you saw, a very young Randy Quaid playing a professor. He's in his early 20s somehow, but he's still a professor. We've covered him a lot too. He was in the Last Picture Show for Bogdanovich. A lot of these actors and behind-the-scenes people were. Of course, he's in Christmas Vacation, Quaid is, Independence Day, Brokeback Mountain, and then Chris and I covered him in Days of Thunder and Kingpin on Scoring at the Movies. So that's 7 movies now for Quaid that I've covered. Liam Dunn, Judge Maxwell, her father in this, was in a lot of Mel Brooks films, another guy that was, along with Khan and Mars. Emmett Walsh is a brief scene as the arresting officer, I guess is what he is.
Yeah, it's crazy. I saw his
name.
He
Looks and sounds about the same.
But
we covered him in
see him at all.
Blood Simple in April. He was also in Blade Runner and many other pictures. The last cast member I'll mention is John Hillerman, who has a small role. He was in the Last Picture Show too. He's a teacher, I think, when they're all in school, and he's in Chinatown, but he's best known for playing Higgins on Magnum P.I. for a long time. Bogdanovich also produced this movie, and he had story credit. One thing he did in this that I didn't love exactly, it happens in Fleabag, which I didn't really, with the TV show, which I didn't love all the time too. It felt forced. I felt it was a little forced in this too, is when he has O'Neill break the fourth wall a few times, looking right at the camera. Almost like a, can you believe this is going on audience stuff? We talked about Benton and Newman writing this. They had worked on Bonnie and Clyde. Benton went on to do Kramer versus Kramer and so many really good movies, and Newman wrote with him for a long time there. Buck Henry worked on The Graduate. So it's a great screenplay. Probably should have been nominated for the Oscar. Not a great screenplay, but a very good screenplay at least. The movie's 185-1. We saw it on Turner Classic Movies. I thought the print looked and sounded excellent for a movie, especially this old.
Truly, yeah.
Because we didn't think Barry Lyndon, which was also on TCM, looked all that good. And we just covered that 2 weeks ago. Cinematographer shooting this zaniness was Laszlo Kovacs, who worked on Easy Rider and Ghostbusters and did a lot of movies with Bob Rafelson. We've never covered Bob Rafelson. We'll probably do 5 Easy Pieces this year. But he was another guy back in the 70s who was making hit, or at least good movie after good movie, and then not so much as he got older. Kovacs also shot other movies with Bogdanovich, so they worked well together, I guess. We've talked about Fields already, although I will say that she also worked as a sound editor, so she had a career before she got into visual editing. She was working as a sound editor before. And I think even past the time she became a film editor, she did some sound editing. Composer Artie Butler wasn't really a composer on this. He was more of an arranger because it was a lot of Cole Porter and classic songs. He worked on Annie Hall, but he also worked on At Long Last Love, one of Bogdanovich's follow-ups to this. So I guess we've talked about all these things, but the script and the direction, the camera work, the cutting, the music.
It's great. The cutting especially. There's a reason why people talk about the editing of this film. The pacing is... Not
nominated, though.
I get it, though. Comedies are so Academy unfriendly. And this is a particularly over-the-top silliness. Like, it's just so light and fluffy. It was billed in marketing as a wacky screwball comedy with absolutely no redeeming social importance. That's like how they actually advertise it. So the Academy rarely touches that stuff.
That's fair enough, considering we covered Barry Lyndon 2 weeks ago, Battleship Potemkin last week, and I'm covering The Guns of Navarone next week, which are all pretty important movies, and this one really is the sore thumb of the group here.
But in the spirit of Sullivan's Travels, we need silly, lighthearted movies.
You're not a fan of that
too.
one.
I don't like that movie, but I agree with the sentiment that there's huge value to the comedies that are just comedy for comedy's sake. And also, comedy is the hardest thing to do. There's a reason there's not that many movies like this. It's practically impossible. It takes a certain kind of talent. It's interesting to me that Bogdanovich didn't make many more straightforward, silly comedies like this. He could have made this his whole wheelhouse. But many other people took up, especially Mel Brooks and then the Zucker brothers, the spirit of comedy well into the 70s and 80s.
Later this year, they're doing Naked Gun again. They're rebooting it with
Liam
Neeson plays Drebin's son. So it is a sequel, I guess.
Great casting.
Yeah, these kinds of comedies are always welcome. And this was also the era of Nixon and Watergate and, of course, Vietnam, too. So it's nice counter-programming to what was happening in reality, which was pretty terrible. The 70s was an incredible decade for film, but a tough decade in many other ways, because you went from Vietnam and all the Nixon stuff to, I don't really hate disco, but people say disco's terrible. It almost seemed like it was this weird, really serious, awful stuff to unnecessary silliness, but you always have to have
people hating
comedy.
Disco were racist and homophobic. That's a big part of why disco got so much flack.
One of the hugest hits of the entire decade was Saturday Night Fever, and that was, of course, the disco movie.
Back to What's Up, Doc? I think that the technicals deserve tons of credit for making something that's very hard look very effortless.
Fair, yeah.
And for embracing the more is more attitude to putting a joke on a joke on a joke. The stunt performances in this movie are out of this world. As much as any action film, there's some incredible stuff happening here.
When they have the stunt Oscar, I think it's a couple years from now, there'll be a new category, finally. They convinced the Academy to have a stunt Oscar. Cruise is undoubtedly, well, I don't know with Cruise, maybe not, may not be alive. But Cruise should probably present it, unless he's up for it that year. Maybe a Jackie Chan then, if it's not Cruise. But they better homage Cruise, Chan, Buster Keaton, and if they have some kind of montage of all the great stunts of all time, they better have some shots from this movie, even if it's just, well, I guess mostly would be the car chase. What happens next? Well, Judy gets sick of boring old Howard in a few weeks, and he's heartbroken that it ended. But he got his grant, he had his fun, probably had some pretty good sex.
He dished Eunice.
And he didn't really love Eunice anyway. I guess maybe, by the way, that when she's under that blanket on the piano, that leads to them having sex, doesn't it? Even though he is still a fiancé of Eunice.
It's
suggested, kiss, fade out.
I mean, it was so gently implied that anybody who doesn't want to believe it can certainly
He's a cheater.
Walk away from it being like, all they did was kiss.
Right, the last thoughts on what was not that short a podcast after all, I guess. What's up, Doc? Ba-da-ba-da-da, what's up, Doc? I gotta find that episode so I know what I'm talking about, but I know I've heard Bugs Bunny say it like that. It was a song, I'm going to point out.
For sure,
Okay,
yeah,
I
remember that too. I'm glad this has a place among those classics of Mel Brooks and the Zucker Brothers and the 30s screwball comedies.
Capra and Hawks.
Yeah, it is so much fun.
Buster Keaton, yeah. It was a fun time in the movies. It's impressive versatility for Bogdanovich to be able to go from the serious black and white period drama of The Last Picture Show to this rambunctious homage to 30s era screwball comedies. Bogdanovich to me has come off as a pompous artiste for so long, but he can be fun too. Maybe Streisand also in a lot of ways fits that mold, but she can be fun. She's quite funny in Meet the Fockers and Little Fockers. She and Hoffman together, those sequels aren't as good as the first Meet the Parents movie, but those two steal, certainly the second one, Streisand and Hoffman as Ben Stiller's parents. And that's one of the last movies she did, I think, was Little Fockers. She's made maybe two since. The last thing I got to pay tribute to, you just did a second ago, but I'm going to do it again, and that's the stunts. I guess Paul Baxley was the stunt coordinator. Well done, sir. Should have been an Oscar back in the 70s to reward the stunt team that made this film. So that was how we saw What's Up, Doc? The next time you'll be able to download a podcast from this channel will be next Monday, only it'll just be my voice. And since it'll be Memorial Day for America, my monologue will be about a war movie, The Guns of Navarone. Or if you're Sam Jackson in Pulp Fiction, I'm the Guns of the Navarone. It's not the Navarone, it's just Navarone. But yes, Bev will be off that day, just her typical one Monday off per month schedule here. When she returns in 2 weeks, in June, by then, we'll be wagging our gums about lovely ladies Emma Thompson and Kate Winslet, along with proper gentlemen, Alan Rickman, Hugh Grant, and Ang Lee's Sense and Sensibility. The coming attractions trivia for Sense and Sensibility. I always rave about Kate Winslet whenever I get the chance, but I'm a pretty big fan of Emma Thompson too, Alan Rickman and Hugh Grant as well. Which of those four actors, though, so Winslet, Thompson, Rickman, and Grant, has been covered the most often on this channel? Is it my girl Katie?
So for the answer to that question, check out in 2 weeks our podcast about Sense and Sensibility. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to favorite or subscribe wherever you do listen. We have hundreds of episodes, 666 episodes available for you to check out. Yeah.
I'm going to kill you. There's a little bit of demonic action at the very end. Go ahead.
If you like us and you'd like to support the podcast, the best way you can do that is by leaving us a rating and a review. And another way to support us and a great small Canadian business that we genuinely use and love is by going to sparkplug.coffee/HYES, where you can get freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, and that HYES will get you started with a 20% discount. You can find us on YouTube. Our channel is at HYES Ellis, and we'd love to hear from you guys. There's a few ways that you can find us, starting with Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis Ellis. Ryan is at MovieFiend51. We're also on Blue Sky. You can find me as Bev Ellis Ellis, and Ryan is Ryan-Ellis, and our email address is haveyouveriseennpodcast@gmail.com.
So one more thing about it being a 666 podcast. That is all, folks. That's all, folks. That's all, folks.
And cut.